My name is Kimberly Torres, and at 32, I thought I understood the rhythm of Pearl Harbor Medical Center in Oyster Bay, Hawaii. As the quality assurance coordinator, I'd spent 4 years walking these polished corridors, my badge swinging against the tropical print scrubs that had become my uniform. The morning trade winds would sweep through the open-air walkways connecting our buildings, carrying the scent of plumeria and salt air that made even the most stressful shifts bearable. Pearl Harbor Medical Center wasn't just any hospital. It served both civilian and military families, creating a unique blend of protocols and personalities. The morning huddles in the main conference room overlooked Pearl Harbor itself, where the Arizona Memorial stood as a constant reminder of service and sacrifice. It was a place where precision mattered, where every decision carried weight beyond the immediate moment. Monica Anderson had been the infection control nurse for 6 years when I arrived, and she'd taken me under her wing from day one. Her office sat at the intersection of 2 major hallways, positioned perfectly to observe the flow of staff and visitors. Monica knew everyone's schedule, everyone's habits, everyone's weaknesses. She'd greet me each morning with a warm smile and updates about policy changes, always seeming to know things before they were officially announced. "Kimberly, perfect timing," she'd say, appearing at my elbow during my rounds. "I just heard from administration about the new documentation requirements. Want to grab coffee and I'll fill you in?" These informal briefings became routine. Monica would share insights about staff performance issues, upcoming inspections, and administrative decisions that hadn't yet filtered down through official channels. She had an uncanny ability to predict which departments would face scrutiny and which staff members might struggle with new protocols. The Epic system logs showed Monica accessing patient records across multiple units, far beyond what her infection control role required. When I mentioned this during a casual conversation, she laughed it off. "You know how it is with infection tracking. I need to follow patterns wherever they lead. Sometimes that means checking records that seem unrelated at first glance." Her explanation made sense. Infection control did require broad access to identify potential outbreaks and trace transmission patterns. But something about her tone felt rehearsed, like she prepared that answer for exactly this question. Small incidents began accumulating like morning mist over the harbor. Staff members would mention conversations with Monica about their performance reviews before those reviews were scheduled. Nurses would reference policy interpretations that contradicted what I'd learned in training sessions. When I checked the official documentation, these interpretations were nowhere to be found. Monica mentioned that the new hand hygiene protocol requires documentation every 15 minutes. Catherine Martinez told me during a break. Catherine worked in pediatrics and was meticulous about following procedures. I pulled up the actual protocol on my tablet. "It's every 30 minutes, Catherine. Where did you hear 15? Her confusion was genuine. Monica stopped by yesterday during shift change. She said administration was cracking down and wanted more frequent documentation to avoid citations. The official protocol hadn't changed. I checked twice, even calling the compliance office to confirm. Yet somehow, Monica's version was spreading through the hospital like wildfire, creating unnecessary work and anxiety among staff who were already stretched thin. During the monthly quality review meeting, Monica presented infection rates with charts that didn't match the data I'd compiled. Her numbers showed concerning trends in units where my reports indicated stable or improving conditions. When I quietly questioned the discrepancy after the meeting, she pulled me aside. "I've been tracking some additional metrics that aren't in the standard reports," she explained, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "There are patterns emerging that could indicate serious compliance issues. I didn't want to alarm anyone until I had more concrete." The way she said it made me feel foolish for questioning her expertise. Monica had years of experience and connections throughout the hospital. If she was seeing patterns I'd missed, perhaps I needed to pay closer attention to my own work. But the feeling persisted, a subtle wrongness that I couldn't quite identify. It was like hearing a familiar song played in the wrong key, recognizable but somehow off. The morning trade winds still carried the scent of plumeria through the corridors. But lately, they felt less like a blessing and more like a warning. Standing at my office window, watching the sun set over Pearl Harbor, I realized that the Inu had been building for weeks. Monica's helpful insights, her advanced knowledge of administrative decisions, her access to information that seemed to exceed her role, it all felt too convenient, too perfectly timed. Something was wrong at Pearl Harbor Medical Center, and Monica Anderson was at the center of it. The relationship with Monica had begun 18 months earlier, during my first week as Quality Assurance Director at Pearl Harbor Medical Center. I was 28 then, fresh from completing my healthcare administration master's degree and eager to prove myself in a role that felt both challenging and meaningful. The hospital's reputation for excellence drew me to Oyster Bay, and the opportunity to work in such a prestigious facility seemed like the perfect start to my career. Monica Anderson had been the first person to welcome me during orientation. As the senior infection control nurse, she possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of hospital protocols and an impressive network of relationships that spanned every department. Her 15 years at Pearl Harbor Medical had earned her a reputation as someone who got things done, someone administrators trusted to handle sensitive situations with discretion and expertise. Quality assurance and infection control work hand in hand, she'd explained during our first coffee meeting in the hospital cafeteria. We're both guardians of patient safety, just approaching it from different angles. I think we're going to work beautifully together. Her mentorship proved invaluable during those early months. When I struggled to understand the complex reporting relationships between departments, Monica guided me through the organizational maze. When I needed historical context for quality metrics, she provided detailed background that helped me identify trends and patterns. Her recommendations carried weight with hospital leadership, and she'd advocated for additional resources for my department when budget discussions arose. The trust between us deepened when Monica began sharing confidential insights about staff performance issues. She'd approach me after meetings, speaking in hushed tones about concerns she observed during her rounds. I hate to bring this up, she'd say, but I've noticed some documentation inconsistencies in the cardiac unit. Nothing that rises to the level of formal reporting yet, but something we should monitor closely. Her observations always proved accurate. When I investigated, I'd find exactly the issues she described: minor protocol deviations, incomplete documentation, or communication gaps that could potentially impact patient care. Monica's ability to spot these problems early allowed us to address them through education and process improvement rather than disciplinary action. The collaboration extended beyond quality metrics. Monica influenced hiring decisions for positions that intersected with infection control, and her recommendations consistently resulted in strong additions to our teams. When the respiratory therapy department needed a new supervisor, Monica's suggestion led us to an exceptional candidate who transformed the unit's performance within 6 months. I have a good eye for people, Monica would say with a modest smile. You learn to read character when you've been in healthcare as long as I have. Her staff recommendations carried similar weight. When performance issues arose, Monica's input helped determine whether additional training might resolve problems or if more serious interventions were necessary. Hospital leadership valued her judgment, often asking for her perspective during personnel discussions. The first crack in my confidence appeared during a routine audit of infection control documentation. While reviewing quarterly reports, I noticed subtle inconsistencies in the data Monica had provided for my quality assessments. Dates didn't align perfectly, and some incident numbers appeared to be duplicated across different reporting periods. When I mentioned the discrepancies, Monica seemed genuinely concerned. The new documentation system has been glitchy, she explained. I've been manually cross-referencing everything to ensure accuracy, but sometimes the automated reports pull outdated information. I'll double-check those numbers and get you corrected versions. The revised reports arrived within hours, perfectly formatted and internally consistent. Yet something about the speed of the correction bothered me. Database errors typically required IT involvement and took days to resolve, not hours. A week later, during a department head meeting, Monica presented infection rates that contradicted the data in my quarterly safety report. Her numbers showed a concerning uptick in surgical site infections, while my analysis of the same period indicated stable rates well within acceptable parameters. I've been tracking some additional variables, Monica explained when I approached her privately. Sometimes the standard metrics don't capture the full picture. These supplementary measurements help identify trends before they become problems. Her explanation sounded reasonable, but it raised questions about why she hadn't shared these enhanced tracking methods with me earlier. As Quality Assurance Director, I should have been aware of any additional monitoring protocols that might impact our overall safety assessments. The pattern continued over the following weeks. Monica would present information that differed from our reports, always with plausible explanations about enhanced monitoring or early detection methods. Each time, she positioned herself as being more thorough, more proactive, more attuned to potential problems than the standard protocols required. During a particularly tense administrative meeting about staffing levels, Monica raised concerns about several nurses whose performance she'd been monitoring. She presented detailed documentation of incidents I'd never seen before: missed medication times, incomplete patient assessments, communication failures that could have compromised care. I've been working with these individuals informally, Monica explained to the assembled administrators, but the patterns are becoming too consistent to ignore. We may need to consider more formal interventions. The nurses she identified were subsequently placed on performance improvement plans, their schedules restricted, and their advancement opportunities limited. When I tried to review the documentation supporting these actions, Monica explained that much of the tongue came from her direct observations during rounds, supplemented by informal reports from other staff members who preferred to remain anonymous. People trust me to handle these situations sensitively, she said. If we formalize every observation, staff will stop coming with concerns. Sometimes protecting the reporting process is more important than perfect documentation. The logic seemed sound, but it created a system where Monica's word carried extraordinary weight in personnel decisions. Her observations could effectively careers, yet the supporting remained largely inaccessible to other administrators. My growing crystallized during a late evening when I returned to the hospital to retrieve files I'd forgotten. The administrative wing was nearly empty, most offices dark except for the security lighting. As I approached my department, I noticed light coming from Monica's office, which was unusual since she typically left by 6 o'clock. Through her partially open door, I could see Monica at her computer, working intently on what appeared to be incident reports. The screen showed our hospital's documentation system, but she was accessing sections I didn't recognize. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, entering information into fields that seemed to be creating new entries rather than updating existing ones. I hesitated in the hallway, uncertain whether to interrupt. Monica's concentration was complete, her attention focused entirely on the screen. As I watched, she opened what looked like personnel files, cross-referencing information between different systems in a way that suggested she was building comprehensive profiles of individual staff members. The next morning, I casually mentioned seeing her working late, but Monica's response was evasive. "Oh, just catching up on some documentation backlog. You know how it is, the paperwork never ends." But the image of her intense focus, the unfamiliar screens, the systematic ways she'd been accessing multiple databases, stayed with me. That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. Using my administrative access, I began reviewing the audit trails for recent documentation changes in our quality management system. What I found made my hands shake as I scrolled through screen after screen of. Monica had been creating false incident reports, backdating entries to support disciplinary actions against staff members she'd targeted. The documentation she'd presented as of performance problems had been fabricated, inserted into our systems with timestamps that made them appear to be contemporary observations. The nurses placed on performance improvement plans, the staff members whose advancement had been blocked, the personnel decisions that had shaped our department for months, all of it had been built on manufactured that existed only in Monica's carefully constructed digital trail. She hadn't just been influencing decisions. She'd been systematically destroying careers through deliberate deception, using her position and my trust to legitimize actions based on complete fabrications. The betrayal cut deeper than professional misconduct. Monica had made me complicit in her scheme, using my reports and my credibility to support her false narratives. Every time I'd defended a disciplinary action based on her recommendations, every time I'd presented data that included her manipulated information, I'd unknowingly participated in her deception. Sitting in my office as the sun set over Pearl Harbor, I realized that the woman I'd trusted as a mentor and colleague had been systematically undermining the very principles we'd sworn to uphold. The question now was what to do with the I'd uncovered, and whether anyone would believe that Monica Anderson, respected, experienced, trusted Monica Anderson, was capable of such calculated betrayal. This sat on my desk like a loaded weapon, screenshots, audit trails, timestamps that told a story of systematic deception spanning 18 months. I'd spent the weekend documenting everything, cross-referencing Monica's false reports with actual patient outcomes and staff performance metrics. The pattern was undeniable, but proving it would require navigating hospital politics more treacherous than any medical emergency. Monday morning arrived with the usual controlled chaos of shift change. I watched Monica move through the unit with her characteristic confidence, greeting staff, reviewing charts, maintaining the facade of the dedicated infection control nurse. Knowing what I knew now, her every interaction felt calculated, performative. "Kimberly, do you have a moment?" Dr. Catherine Williams, our chief medical officer, appeared at my office door. Her timing couldn't have been more fortuitous. Catherine was one of the few administrators I trusted completely, someone whose integrity had never been questioned in her 15 years at Pearl Harbor Medical Center. "Actually, Catherine, I need to speak with you about something urgent, something that affects the entire quality management program." Her expression shifted from casual to concerned as she stepped inside and closed the door. "What's going on?" I turned my computer screen toward her, pulling up the first set of audit trails. I've discovered systematic falsification of quality documentation by Monica Anderson. She's been creating false incident reports and backdating entries to support disciplinary actions against staff members. Catherine's face went pale as I walked her through the fabricated reports, the manipulated timestamps, the correlation between Monica's false documentation and subsequent personnel decisions. With each screen, Catherine's expression grew more grave. "This is extensive," she said finally. "How long has this been going on?" "At least 18 months, possibly longer. She's been using her position to influence hiring decisions, block promotions, and place innocent staff members on performance improvement plans based on completely fabricated." Catherine leaned back in her chair, processing the implications. "The legal ramifications alone, not to mention the career she's damaged. We need to involve hospital administration immediately, but we also need to be careful about how we proceed. Monica has allies throughout the organization." That afternoon, Catherine arranged a confidential meeting with Henry Richardson, our hospital administrator, and Diana Martinez from Human Resources. The conference room felt smaller with the weight of what we were discussing. A trusted department head systematically undermining the institution's integrity. "Before we proceed," Henry said after reviewing I need to ask directly, is there any possibility this could be explained by system errors or misunderstandings? I'd anticipated this question. I verified the audit trails with our IT department. These entries were manually created and backdated. There's no technical explanation for what we're seeing. Diana had been taking notes throughout the presentation. "We'll need to conduct a formal investigation, but given the scope of the allegations, we should consider placing Monica on administrative leave pending the outcome." "That's going to raise questions," Catherine warned. "Monica is well regarded. People will want to know why." Henry nodded grimly. "We'll say it's a routine review of quality management procedures. Nothing more until we have definitive findings." The investigation began quietly the next morning. Diana worked with our IT security team to preserve all relevant data while I continued my normal duties, trying to maintain the appearance of routine operations. The hardest part was interacting with Monica, knowing what I knew while she remained completely unaware that her deception had been uncovered. "You seem distracted lately," Monica commented during our Wednesday quality meeting. "Everything all right?" The irony of her concern wasn't lost on me. "Just busy with the quarterly reports. You know how it is." She smiled, that familiar, reassuring smile that had once made me feel supported and now made my skin crawl. "Well, don't hesitate to ask if you need help with anything. We're a team, after all." By Thursday, the investigation had expanded to include external auditors from the State Health Department. Monica's administrative leave was announced that afternoon, officially described as a temporary reassignment pending a routine quality review. I watched her pack her office, still maintaining her composure, still believing her deception remained hidden. "This is obviously some kind of misunderstanding," she told me as she gathered her personal items. "I'm sure it'll be resolved quickly." I nodded noncommittally, unable to trust myself to speak. The woman who had mentored me, who had shaped my understanding of quality management, who had earned my complete trust, was still lying even as her world crumbled around her. The following week brought a parade of investigators, interviews, and document reviews. Staff members who had been targeted by Monica's false reports were interviewed, their stories painting a picture of systematic harassment disguised as quality improvement. The nurses who had been placed on performance plans, the technicians whose advancement had been blocked, the colleagues whose reputations had been damaged, all victims of Monica's calculated deception. Amanda Foster, one of the nurses Monica had targeted, broke down during her interview. "I thought I was losing my mind," she admitted. The incidents she reported, I knew they hadn't happened the way she described, but she was so detailed, so convincing, I started questioning my own memory. The psychological impact of Monica's betrayal extended far beyond professional consequences. She had weaponized trust itself, using her position and reputation to make her victims doubt their own experiences and competence. As the investigation progressed, the full scope of Monica's deception became clear. She had created an elaborate system of false documentation, carefully timed to coincide with budget discussions, staffing decisions, and performance reviews. Her influence had shaped personnel decisions affecting dozens of employees over nearly 2 years. The final interview was with Monica herself. I wasn't present, but Diana later described a woman who maintained her innocence even when confronted with irrefutable. Monica claimed the documentation was legitimate, that any irregularities were system errors, that she was being scapegoated for broader institutional problems. She never admitted to anything, Diana told me privately. Even with the audit trails, the timestamps, the witness statements, she maintained her version of events right to the... The investigation concluded on a Friday afternoon, 3 weeks after it began. Monica Anderson was terminated for falsification of medical records, violation of professional ethics, and systematic misconduct. The state nursing board was notified, and criminal charges were being considered for the fraudulent documentation. Standing in my office that evening, looking out at Pearl Harbor as the sun set behind the mountains, I felt a complex mixture of vindication and sadness. Justice had been served, but the cost had been enormous, not just for Monica, but for everyone whose trust she had violated, whose career she had damaged, whose faith in the system had been shaken. The silence in the department felt different now, charged with the knowledge that deception could hide behind the most trusted faces, that betrayal could wear the mask of mentorship and concern. But it was also the silence of truth finally revealed, of justice finally served, of a corrupt system finally cleansed.